help women save lives and peacefully end abortion where you live.
I can tell you exactly what would happen. The infant would be delivered. The infant would be kept comfortable. The infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and the family desired.
You were serious about that?
Be inspired to change hearts and minds by joining over 1 million volunteers taking part in the global movement happening in your neighborhood.
She says, pray that I can get through this abortion. And I said, oh, no. So she went ahead and went into the abortion clinic. When she just came out, she told us, I'm not going to get the abortion. We just had a baby saved. We had a baby saved in Memphis today. Praise the Lord.
This is the 40 Days for Life podcast with your host, Sean Carney.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today on the 40 Days for Life podcast. I'm Sean Carney, the president of 40 Days for Life, and your host for this podcast, which is dedicated to helping you end abortion where you live. And we're having way too much fun recording this podcast today. We were laughing off camera before we started rolling, so we apologize for the joy and the good moods. We have a very serious topic that we will definitely get to, and that is a topic that we've gotten a lot of requests upon about, particularly with the election going on. Fourth trimester abortions. Do they exist? We have been told by politicians in the media there's no abortion at 39 weeks. You're crazy. And there certainly is an infanticide. Quit saying that there is. So we will explore that. Does it happen? Where does it happen? This will be actually a two-part series. Very, very important, because there's a lot of abortion denial going on in our society right now, and we will give you some talking points and some facts and some specific names and places of where these fourth trimester abortions are actually happening and where infanticide is actually happening. And so someone who is very much against fourth trimester abortions but always has a lot of things happening is Mr. Steve Carlin, who joined us in his hoodie from Madison, Wisconsin.
What does that even mean? Someone who is against fourth trimester abortions but always has a lot going
Always
on?
has a lot going on.
You got to listen to the two-part series to get the answer to that. And we're also joined by Heather.
You were supposed to
Who has
introduce Heather
nothing-
first today.
What'd you say?
You were supposed to introduce Heather first today.
Oh, yeah, we got an email saying that.
Oh, we did?
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. We're doing podcast listener feedback today.
We are.
And then okay, I'm interested in this. So I was supposed to introduce you first because to not do so makes me a sexist.
Yes.
Was that word used?
Or no, actually, you could argue that the opposite way, but the wording was basically ladies first, and so that you don't forget.
And if nothing else, just to, I think, mix it up.
And mix it up, yeah.
Okay, well, ladies first. I was doing a best for last approach.
Sure,
So
I'll take that.
That's kind of that's the spin.
Yeah, well, I always have a lot going on.
You do have a lot going on. You got a lot going on. It took us an hour and a half to get you ready for this with your hoodie, and you had some wardrobe malfunction. It wasn't like Janet Jackson in the Super Bowl, but it was getting close.
And you have been unburdened by what has been, so.
Yes.
Yes. Happy October, everyone. So it is political season, and abortion is front and center. And by the way, disclaimer, we are recording this, and it's going to air in a couple of weeks. We'll be traveling. We're in the largest 40 Days for Life campaign ever, over 700 cities. Go find your city at 40daysforlife.com and sign up. So we record this a little bit early, so I don't know. A lot's been going on every week in this political season, so if something is a little off or dated, which it shouldn't be, but just know that, disclaimer. Okay. Feedback. So there's been, here's my theory before you read any of this, because I think I've seen like two of these. The banter is controversial. Okay. It's like you're either with us or you're against us. With us is, of course, pro-banter. But the anti-banter crowd, to me, is... I don't want to pick a movement that's really bad. They're like the loud people that are probably the minority. That's my theory. I may be totally wrong. And if everybody's like, no banter, get to late-term abortion as soon as possible, I don't want to laugh. I don't want to hear you talk. I don't care about Top Gun 2. Shut up. Then we can do that. So what was the feedback?
Well, on the negative side, those who are against us, the axis of evil.
You're with us or you're with the terrorists. Okay.
Wow.
Someone in the comments on YouTube described the banter as, quote, torture.
Wow.
That's awesome.
And it's driven by Sean, so
I'm the lead torturer. I'm waterboarding the listeners. Oh,
Abu Ghraib here.
how do they know it's not torture for us? We try to throw some humor. We make an effort. How do you know we're not ready to get into the topic? Okay.
Most people did not describe it as torture. They just said, I know you guys say everybody likes the banter, but I could go without it. I think we've solved their problem, though, because on the show page, we are now saying the banter ends at 12:47 or wherever it ends, and then they know they can just skip ahead and they don't have to listen to it. But
Can we track who does that?
oh, that would be great.
Like, not like we're coming to your house because you don't like our stupid banter, but like, wow, the pro banter people wrote in, but really they're the minority and most people just skip.
No, I don't think there's a reliable way to do it. So we just have to go on
Right.
the feedback. So we've got a great note here. Sean, Steve, Heather, they're introducing me before Heather, too. Just finished your What to Say When To podcast. I started listening to your podcast earlier this summer, and I am hooked. Very funny, and I love the banter. I have had a particularly challenging year, and often you have me laughing out loud. I look forward to something. Thank you for all of your hard work, dedication, and commitment to saving babies from the truly horrific evil of abortion. This is from, even though the printout dropped here, this is from Charles, who I think we heard from on a question and answer podcast. So
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm grateful for him.
All right, so he's pro banter.
Yeah, we got one here from Peggy. I've been a volunteer client advocate at my local pregnancy center for over 30 years. I have the amazing privilege of sitting toe-to-toe with clients who are contemplating abortion, looking for healing from their previous abortion or are in some other type of crisis. I participated in several 40 Days for Life campaigns. I am also an avid pro-banter listener.
This is a bad t-shirt.
As is my 41-year-old daughter who works in pro-life ministry as well. We agree that your banter helps bring a smidgen of lightheartedness into otherwise very challenging discussions. As a matter of fact, I don't know if I recommend this even myself. I frequently listen to 40 Days for Life podcasts on my drive to see clients. So she's chilling out. She's got heavy life and death conversations. She's going to listen to us talk about grape soda.
So you throw it down.
Keep it
So
cool.
She's listening to like the Navy SEALs would put on Metallica when they're about to go raid like Osama bin Laden. She's putting us on when she's going to the pregnancy center. In all seriousness, though, that is the in my mind when we started. We didn't do banter. For you and I would like mention weather for 2 seconds, but as the podcast grew, we just started doing banter because we'd go places and they're like, oh, I feel like I know you guys, and why didn't you ask Steve about why the Packers lost or whatever? Like they wanted more. So I thought actually of people like that, where if you're in the movement like we are, the banter's probably more for us than anybody. It's very selfish. But like you kind of need and want that escape. Like she's going to counsel women who are on the verge of having an abortion, and it is heavy. It's very heavy, obviously. And so it doesn't hurt to sprinkle in, some humor and connect with the audience. And of course, you can skip over it.
A few days ago, I did an interview for Day 41 magazine, and it's a beautiful story, heartbreaking story, but this couple who, they found out their baby in the womb is sick. The doctors are encouraging abortion. They choose life. They cherish the life of their baby. They've got their baby for a very short time before the baby passes after birth. But it inspired them. They end up leading 40 Days for Life campaign. Just a wonderful story. And I'm kind of like preparing for it. And we're just about to start the interview. And the wife, the mother, says, before we start, there's something I have to say. I'm like, okay, I want to just make sure I got this. So I'm as respectful as possible, sharing their story with the world. She says, I want you to know I'm pro-banter. She's from Australia, and they're like, this is how we follow U.S. pop culture by listening to the 40 Days for Life podcast Banter.
So and I know Heather's anti-banter. You're anti.
I was in the beginning. I would skip the first 5 minutes.
We're a movement of converts.
You're
to
a
listen
convert.
to you. Well, I mean, I'm part of it now, so I guess I can
escape. Why can't you just sit? Why can't you just do this? You just sit here with your arms crossed, ticked off.
skip everyone. Just do it now.
Standing in the anti-banter gap.
I did get some feedback recently. I was blessed to visit, as you guys know, several of our 365 locations over the summer, and I was told to make sure to tell you guys by our wonderful friend Mark and former leader in South Carolina that until I came on the podcast, he was able to listen to it at 2 times the speed, but now because of me, he has to slow it down to 1.5 times. Which I assume means including the banter. He
Okay,
speeds
very
it
good.
up
Yes.
because there's a lot of banter and there's a subject and he's got to get through it like me.
I basically listen to like 3 other podcasts, and one of them is a sports one that is just torturous at how slow they speak.
See?
It's unbelievable, but it's like 1.5, and they sound like a normal speed. I
Mm-hmm.
don't feel like I feel like I talk pretty fast or normal.
No,
I don't?
I can listen to you at 1.5 usually, but apparently I talk faster than you two, so I slowed it down for some listeners.
We're professionals.
That's right, and I'm an amateur.
I'd like to give another quick history of the banter. It's not just random thoughts that we decide we're just going to blab on, although it probably comes off that way. I noticed with the big podcasts, there's either a frustration of like, no banter, I don't care, shut up, get to the point. Those are usually not so serious topics. One of the things that I thought we need to do that for our podcast because it really works was I don't even know if it's on anymore. I'm sure it is. It was a Catholic podcast, Stuff Catholics Should Know, which there's Stuff You Should Know, which is one of the biggest podcasts in the world. So these 2 like 28-year-old priests started something called Stuff Catholics Should Know. So it's like an apologetics thing. And it's not, they cover all sorts of fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
But they would like sit there and drink bourbon and like eat peanuts and talk about like, oh, thank you, the sisters in Germany sent us cheese. And they would banter for like 27 or 28 minutes. Which
Oh,
we
wow.
Don't do. Yeah, long time.
We don't do
And I
that.
found myself, that's all I wanted from them. Like by the time they got to their topic,
You're like,
I used to
who
skip
cares about
Yeah.
apologetics?
And it's because you got to know them, and sometimes they were in like another country, but they still recorded it, and then they're like, they're still kind of, I mean, they're ordained priests, right? But they were still like young dudes where they're like, what do I have on my shirt? You know, that kind of stuff. And very entertaining. And I was like, we definitely can't get away with drinking whiskey on our pro-life podcast.
Nobody knows what's in here.
That's right.
Steve's from Wisconsin. But it was just funny. It became like this character kind of thing where you felt like you knew these guys, and then the content was always really, really good, and they'd explain stuff. But I don't even know if that podcast is still on. When it was on, it was very popular. This is like 2015 when I listened to it because we launched this in 2016.
Sounds
Yes.
Yeah.
If they were 28, they probably have their own parishes right now, and there's no longer time to sit around day drinking and recording a podcast.
They're a little overwhelmed. They're like, remember when we would just start drinking bourbon at noon and hit record? Yeah, those were the good old days. Oh, mercy. Okay. Is that enough banter for you, Heather?
I think it's good.
The
it's
people
good.
have spoken,
They love us. They can't get enough.
according to us. Okay.
Gosh.
So this is out of control because now we say under Roe, which we're all supposed to go back to, by the way. We need to go back to Roe. Under Roe, we had the typical line, which Alito put in the opinion overturning Roe, which is it's puts us in a category with North Korea, China, and Vietnam. Okay, abortion through all 40 weeks. Nobody argued that. They just were like, it's the law of the land. That was the response. That was the what to say when part 1 response.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
And now it's that's not true. And I think the graphic nature, which you described, that it's actually ridiculous. There's not abortions at 39 weeks. And there was some wording where Trump and Kamala were going back during the first debate, back in September, and Trump was horrible in that debate. Obviously, he was terrible. I don't care what anybody says. He's terrible. And she said something like, that is not true. They don't do abortions at 39 weeks. Something along those lines. And I'm like, why not? What's wrong with abortion at 39 weeks? Why do you want to restrict reproductive rights? So there's an apologetic part to this. But number one, this whole term fourth trimester, we need to define, like, what is that?
Right. So there's only 3 trimesters. Doesn't logically make sense to say fourth trimester. However, it has been dubbed that. These would be...
It's smart. I like the term.
Because abortion is a good thing, and so let's just say fourth, and that means, well, what we'll do is make the infant comfortable if that's what the parents want and go from there.
So this isn't our pro-life line, like, oh, they're doing now 4th trimester abortions. This is coming from the abortion advocates themselves?
It has been, yes. I don't know where it originated from, but I've heard it for both, and of course... This is infanticide. This is what this is. I mean, a lot of pro-lifers, I think, will say any abortion is infanticide because those are small human beings. Infants, most people think, well, this is a newborn baby. But regardless, this means that the child has already been born. They are declined care.
You just repeated Governor Northam's.
Correct.
So this isn't like, hey, let's make up that they do infanticide because it makes them seem really evil. He described it on the radio.
Correct. And you're not going to have government statistics coming out and showing that certain percentage of facilities, and this is where these facilities outright left babies in closets to die, or smothered babies, or strangled babies. We'll get into some of those examples later on, but this is essentially what this is it's no longer the birth canal is no longer the magic line of where you get your rights. Now it could be kind of a gray area, and if the parents want the abortion completed still and the baby survived the abortion, then we should still be able to kill the baby. We're never going to use the term kill.
But that the baby is no longer alive.
Yeah, exactly.
So you can point across the room to the baby in like the bassinet and say, kill that child because it's my body?
Yeah, well, it doesn't matter because it was still your property, I think they would say.
My bassinet, my choice.
Yeah. But
that'd be the response.
Do y'all remember, though, there was a couple of things, you'll know why I'm referencing this by the following example, but about 15 years ago, there was this video that went viral by Penn and Teller, and it was about water reservoirs, and they were going around, I don't know where, some sort of common area in a community. They were getting people to sign a petition to ban dihydrogen monoxide from water reservoirs. Do you know what that means?
Is this something that, like, we are supposed to be in water reservoirs?
Dihydrogen, 2 hydrogen, monoxide, 1 oxygen. We're talking about some, as the water boy would put it, high-quality H2O.
So, but because they worded it that way, their whole point was to try to... Tons of people signed it. And
because it's like one of the leading causes of death. Like,
yes.
You know how many people die from...
That's what they said. They said it's one of the leading causes of death. It's in everything. It's in our water reservoirs. It's on our vegetables. It's like it comes out of our faucets.
Factory farmers are just dumping this stuff straight on the vegetables.
And people fell for it, and they signed it. And then, of course, they later on say, like, do you know that you just signed a petition to ban water?
I didn't know about this.
It's kind of like the other thing. There were the petitions going around to ban women's suffrage.
Yeah.
See those?
Yes, that's right.
That. I do remember that.
There's a Friends episode, and Phoebe's like, that's a good thing, even though it doesn't sound like it. Okay, so that example to lead to something similar that happened not long after that. So the Media Research Center's Dan Joseph went around college campuses to get college students to sign a petition to legalize what he worded as 4th trimester abortions.
Gold.
11 years ago is when this video went viral. And he would say, women shouldn't suffer because of an unwanted post-pregnancy.
Love it.
people. Now, there were some people that kind of were like, dude, isn't that?
Yeah.
Like, there's only 3. What are you talking about? And they walked away. But he got several people to sign this because, yay, women's rights, my body, my choice. And then he said, conservatives just want to put all women back in the kitchen. Frankly, my girlfriend can't cook, so that'd be bad news for me.
Did he say that he was from the Media Research Center?
I don't know that I didn't hear him introduce himself in the video. So if he did, that's not clear. I think he just said, I'm here to pass around this petition, to legalize 4th-trimester abortion. And he would just really probe them and try to get them to, yeah, I want to do that. And then sometimes it would show that he would say, that you just signed a petition to legalize infanticide. Like, this is 4th trimester, there's only 3.
And there have been some groups, I know Texas Right to Life did it here, where it's like stop dismemberment abortions. And people are like, well, I'm against those.
Sure, right.
It's like
and
every
it's like,
abortion.
that's almost everyone,
Yeah. Okay, that's gold. But yeah, language really matters. 4th trimester is our way of getting them to, interested. When we say infanticide, they say that doesn't happen. I still say it. I don't care. I'm like, it doesn't, it's not for shock value. It's that they're saying it. And that we know that it goes on, that babies are born alive. They survive. They survive the abortion, thank God. And they're left to die. And Governor Northam, the governor of Virginia, went on the radio in 2019 and described this in detail with his creepy accent. And he's a pediatrician who we don't recommend. And this is after New York passed their law that took advantage of what Roe allowed, which is abortion through all 40 weeks. They removed the requirement of the doctor to do abortion in New York. Have that to this day. And
meaning that a doctor doesn't have to be the one. Anybody that's
correct.
A nurse could or...
Correct. It's between a woman and whoever. And the other thing is that they deny health care to the baby who survives the abortion, which we had the Infant Born Alive Protection Act that failed. We have the names of those people who voted against that. That's not a fun Judgment Day list item. Mm-hmm. But this goes on in the United States.
And these are, going back really quick to the petition on the college campus, these are college students. They were deemed smart enough to get into college, but they can't figure out that tri means 3, trimester. And they're just signing something not knowing that this is talking about after birth. Like, this is sad.
I can give them a pass on that.
They just heard the word abortion.
And we all have a bunch of kids now, but like if somebody asked you like, oh yeah, she's 2nd trimester your freshman year, you'd have been like, yes, of course, I love hockey season. It's 17 weeks.
That's like when you take the term over summer and you're going to summer school, so you can shorten it. What are we doing here?
Yeah. So the trimester thing, I mean, heck, when our kids were being born and, people are like asking Mary Lisa, how far along are you? And she's like, I'm 15 weeks. And I'm like,
well, okay, yeah. You don't know weeks to months, but still.
Yeah.
But yes, okay. So Governor Ralph Northam, some other politicians and elitists. There's so many to list, by the way.
It's been 5 years.
Did we
ever figure out whether Northam was the guy in blackface or the guy in the KKK uniform? I feel like we never got a solid answer to that.
I have no idea.
Boy, he really took a dive off the cliff of politics because he just went downhill so fast.
He was clever enough, though, so he had that scandal where there was the photo with him and you couldn't tell whether he was in it. Was he the blackface guy or the KKK guy? Who knows? Which one is worse? Not even quite sure. And he just refused to step down. Everyone is demanding his resignation, and he just refused to. He just, no, I'm just going to keep being governor. What are you going to do about it? And then it turns out that the 2nd and 3rd guys in line, one of them was also involved in a race scandal, and the other one was accused of rape. And so I guess we'll just keep him in there. And now you can just do anything.
And then did he even run for re-election?
There's only one-term governor limit in
Virginia.
Yeah.
Because then Youngkin won and replaced him. Okay, so Governor Tim Walz, the VP candidate, as of the recording of this podcast. So Tim Walz this is crazy because they're like, oh, well, this doesn't happen. Well, it's documented. We're not making this up. I wish we were. I wish this was propaganda. It happened 8 times per year in Minnesota. So it's allowed in Minnesota. He takes over as governor and removes the requirement to report the deaths. So the baby, the abortion is botched. The baby is there. You allow the baby to suffocate. He or she dies. Waltz removed the requirement to report it. So it's not that like you're for drunk driving. You're for drunk driving, and when it kills someone, you don't want that to be reported. So this is so far beyond like, guys, this is graphic. I mean, come on.
And
The Democrats are not for abortion at 40 weeks. Quit saying this. This is absolutely absurd. Nobody's for this. It doesn't go on.
And I found it interesting that even former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, advised him to tone it down, and he publicly rejected that advice.
When you've lost Nancy Pelosi,
yeah.
it's kind of bad.
But she's telling you you're too pro-abortion.
Yeah.
And then he did I won't tone it down.
Yep.
Do you like the Chris Farley comparisons with him when he's coming out? Or you love Chris Farley, so you don't want to do that. Okay. But it's Chris Farley in character. So, but we have to admit, if Chris Farley were alive, which I really wish he were, he's definitely playing Waltz on Saturday Night Live. It would have been gold.
So how many states do we have? This is a question that's difficult to answer right now. How many states do we have where it's actually written in their law that you must preserve the life of the unborn child? We all thought, well,
unborn or after birth?
Sorry, the child, the child that's birthed already. So they survived an abortion. Everybody thought automatically you get rights then. That's when you're deemed a human being with protection.
Something where you don't actually need to have it protected in law because
like you don't have to state it specifically and go
There's
out
not
of
a
your
law
way.
that says if someone is in a car accident and they go to the hospital, you should treat them because everybody knows that's why a hospital is there to take care of people who are injured, sick,
right?
Help preserving their lives.
But this was something that was pointed out by several groups, conservative political groups, where the Minnesota statutes, there is a section in it that talks about this, and they changed some of the terminology. And the one that I thought was most interesting was all reasonable measures consistent with good medical practice, including the compilation of appropriate medical records, shall be taken by the responsible medical personnel to, and it used to say, preserve the life and health of the born alive infant. They crossed that part out and they inserted to care for the infant who is born alive. Now, what that to most people would be like. So instead of
preserve their life, it's care for their life.
Exactly. Most people would be like, yeah, exactly. That's so subtle. But no, because abortion is also care to these people.
Part of the care is having the little boy or little girl suffocate and die.
Yes.
That's labeled as care. By the way,
that's
for
evil.
the listen, this is 2022 statute. The listener needs to know. This isn't like we dug this out of the 1990s or something.
Right.
And this is under Governor Waltz.
And I just thought that was sick.
Minnesota.gov website.
Yep, it's from the Minnesota.gov website. Screenshot. I know Jill will show it. It's super disturbing and deceitful. It's typical of the abortion industry, but it's just sick. Like, because we know what they mean by care.
But also, this is documented. So it's not. This isn't pro-life propaganda. Why don't they just own it?
Right.
Like what's equivalent to that for the Republicans? What's the most outrageous thing that sounds made up that you just think is false?
Republicans want to get rid of, white supremacy. They want to get rid of all people of ethnic minority.
Okay, they're racist and
Because there's no such thing as Hispanic Republicans and
so this is the point of the intellectual exercise, I guess. So, okay, great. Well, that's horrible. Wow. They're really bad. Where is that written down that they want to do that? and it's not. And I think a good recent example, which is comical depending on where you are, is the Haitians. They're eating all these cats and dogs, and they're chewing on their legs and their paws, and it's terrible. and he just goes off on this, like in the debate. You're like, what was the question? Like he's way off the rails. And you asked me when all this was happening, do you think that they were eating the cats and dogs? And I'm like, I don't know. I hope they are if they're hungry. Like, what do I care? Like, I don't, this is the major issue. Like, if somebody's starving to death because they came to our country legally or illegally and they snag a cat and they eat Skittles to survive.
Skittles the cat?
Skittles the
Okay.
cat. Okay. Sorry.
Taste
Fluffy.
the rainbow.
Fluffy. Yeah. And of course, I love animals and all that stuff. That's not really true.
You kind of don't. Yeah, no, you admitted otherwise.
Well, I love them, especially if they're next to a carbohydrate.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't want people's pets to get eaten, all this. But that became this huge thing that somehow, like, Trump it's irrelevant. Like, of all the points you could make about immigration, this was like number like 10,821. Like, why did you even go there? It was just weird. And then of course there's videos of people doing it. It's like, we're still on this. Now we can prove that they're eating the cats and all that. But that's just nowhere near this. Is my point. That is nowhere near, like, when Trump said that, I hadn't even heard anything about that. And when Trump said that, I'm like, I don't think that that's true. It probably could be true. I guess if you're starving to death, you would eat a dog, right? But it doesn't sound as made up as, hey, their babies survive an abortion and they're dying. They're letting them die. They're just sitting there. And one was found like in a basket of towels, of linens. That's where I'd be like, that's totally made. Look, all right, the Haitians are definitely eating cats. I can accept that. But you're a nut. And yet this is written down and totally documented. And obviously there's a level of gravity here that is not the whole Haitian thing, which became a bunch of memes and just weird. But this is documented on the government's website. We know it's happened in Texas. We know it's happened all across the country where there's an illegal abortion or a legal abortion. And by the way, it's documented back when it was illegal with Gosnell, and I know we'll get to him, chopping the heads off of babies who survived an abortion. People survive an abortion, and there's two angles to this. There's, no, we wish we were making it up. It sounds nuts, but it's real. And by the way, what difference does it make? Okay, and we'll get to that part. If you're going to kill the baby, now all of a sudden you're just the epitome of compassion because the baby's on the table. But there's the other side, which is we know they're born alive because sometimes they're not left to die. And you have Gianna Jessen, and you have Claire Colwell, and you have Melissa Oden, and the abortion doctor signed Gianna Jessen's birth certificate in great irony. It's documented that they went in to get an abortion and it didn't work, and they're alive today. So we know it happens because we have the survivors, and we know it happens because we have the law written on the internet.
This is part of a playbook, I think, because we see the same thing in the transgender issue, right? There are no 8-year-olds who are getting castrated and mutilated.
Yes.
But we need to make sure it's available because when it does happen, it's a good thing.
And
it never happens, but when it does, it's a good thing.
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain whenever it's exposed at school board meetings and all sorts of things like that. But
there's not pornographic books in the school libraries, but we need to have them there.
And we can't let you read it out loud at the school board meeting. It's way too graphic and inappropriate. I don't know what you guys think of. You'll remember this next quote. I was reminded of this when I was researching, and I could not believe that this was in 2013, that this was this many years ago already. It seems like it was like 5 years ago.
No, to me, I think it feels like it's like 2002.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So the quote is, it was the Planned Parenthood lobbyists in 2013. They were opposing the Infants Born Alive Act in Florida. And she said, "We believe any decision that's made should be left up to the woman, her family, and the physician." Abortion advocates leapt to lobbyists' defense, targeting the Infant Born Alive Act, fundamentally flawed assumption that this type of situation is a real risk. This was, I should have said, unquote, after physician. So So she said that, and then the abortion advocates leapt to the lobbyist's defense. This was a fundamentally flawed assumption that this type of situation is a real risk, and asserting that the born-alive infants were incredibly unlikely. However, since 2013, when the act was signed into law, 42 babies have been born alive during abortions in Florida, and this was as of January 2023.
Yeah. No. And that's one of the greatest clips online because the Planned Parenthood rep, when he says, but what do you do? The baby has now survived.
Yes.
What do you do with the baby when the abortion didn't work?
What is the protocol?
And she said, our focus would be on the patient at hand.
Whatever the mother wants.
And whatever the mother wants. And then he said, well, at this point, isn't the baby the patient? And it's just dead silence.
I don't really have an answer to that question. That's an interesting question.
Yep.
Yeah, it is interesting. Well, you're going to leave people to die. It was really a great exchange. And this is why this podcast is probably overdue for us to do as a topic, because they just deny it in 2024. This is back in 2013. It's 11 years ago.
Yeah.
We have on this podcast acknowledged that in the history of the pro-life movement, there has been time where wackos have gone and done violence to abortion doctors. Like there have been bombings, there have been shootings. I think it's been a long time. Like maybe was Tiller the last one 15 years ago, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, Tiller's the last one.
And it was relatively rare. I mean, I think very rare at that point. This is like an 80s or early 90s type of thing. So imagine that someone wanted to pass a law that says it's illegal to kill an abortion provider. Would we come out against that law because we say it doesn't happen anymore?
I know.
Right.
No, it's a really good point.
Yeah.
It's a really good point. And my question is, I don't want the denial that it goes on. I want the honesty. Like, are you for that or are you against it? I think most people who support abortion are against that. Yeah. I do. I don't think that your average abortion supporter wants abortion at 40 weeks. And I think your average abortion supporter and probably Planned Parenthood worker would be like, if the baby's born alive, we're helping it. We're helping her. And we've seen conversions of that happen because that's how they ended up getting Gosnell, because one of the nurses turned on them. But what's wrong with addressing and being honest with the reality that it actually goes on? Like, aren't we scared of being a horrific, barbaric society? I mean, that's like right now, if somebody went out and started shooting abortion doctors and we were like, well, there's a lot of different opinions out there and all that. It's like, what? That's not what we want. Mm-mm. That's not what we want at all. And it's amazing you don't hear that. And I think this is why, well, let's just take Trump because he's the candidate. But Kamala's for all abortions and all of that. And we've always been ill-equipped with political candidates. He's been probably the best one because he's described how barbaric abortion is, and he's always pointed out that Roe allowed abortion through 40 weeks, and he's always said they would have taken the baby and they would have ripped the baby out. He's done that. I mean, George W. Bush was never going to do that. John McCain was never going to do that. Romney was pro-choice deep down, and it appeared that way in his campaign also. And but if we had more of an eloquent candidate one day where they're just asking her, are you for abortion? I mean, there may be nothing wrong with abortion at 39 weeks. Or what do we do with the babies? You know what I mean? Just ask the fair question and get them to answer.
It doesn't happen and then, well, okay, it rarely happens and then you're just full of crap and we don't need to pass this law to protect them.
Or I don't think we need to have the government involved in women's health care. Like, no, I get all that.
Yeah.
Should we have abortion at 39 weeks?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if so, why? If not, why? So, okay.
There's some history ones now.
Yes. You brought up James Watson.
I want people to know this is not a new thing. It's not an old thing. It's been happening for a long time. It's yesterday and today.
Well, He suggested in 1973, if a child were not declared alive until 3 days after birth, then all parents could be allowed the choice only a few are given under the present system. The doctor could allow the child to die if the parents so choose and save a lot of misery and suffering. I believe this view is the only rational, compassionate attitude to have.
That's an interesting thing. Like, if the baby were not declared alive,
It's in limbo.
like, we can just take a vote on when life begins.
Well, I love this quote because this is actually at the heart of everything, which is, look, I'm God, and we can just decide how we do this. So if we don't declare that the baby's alive, we're really good. So the compassion is flowing out of us. The parents don't have to deal with all this, and it's really sad. And then they won't be around, the parents. We can kill the baby, and it all just kind of goes away, and it's clean, and they're not part of it.
Well, I declare you're not alive, buddy.
Totally. It's just Charlie Gard.
That's where it logically leads.
Well, it wasn't in Charlie's best interest that he be allowed to live, right? Isn't that what the
The
judge
judge
said?
said it is not in Charlie's best interest that he live,
Yeah.
which would have been obviously news to Charlie.
Yes.
But this is the doctor this is the solution. The doctor could allow the child to die if the parents so choose. So you're in the lobby and they're like, there's a little bit of movement going on. Like, here's your menu. Like, care, rest, or put to sleep, however they word it. And they check the box. They're not in the room. And this guy thinks this is the compassionate, appropriate way to do this when the baby's born.
And so James Watson is one of the discoverers of the double helix structure of DNA, in case some folks are wondering. That name kind of rings a bell. His partner, Francis Crick, said just a few years later in 1978, no newborn infant should be declared human until it has passed certain tests regarding its genetic endowment, and if it fails these tests, it forfeits the right to live.
I kind of agree with that. And I think that genetic test should be, does it have 46 chromosomes of human DNA? I think that's my test.
That's the end of it. Yeah. Well, they determine the test, Steve. I don't think that they're going to be asking you.
It's disturbing. I was very disturbed when I read these.
It's very disturbing. That's why we're having this very disturbing podcast. They want some banter now, don't they? But the no newborn infant should be declared human until it has passed certain tests regarding its genetic endowment, and that if it fails these tests, it forfeits its rights to live. And who determines if it passes or fails? I do. Francis Crick and James Watson. And Francis Crick was James Watson's partner.
The DNA guys, of everybody who should know what it means to declare.
Well, I actually that was my first reaction, but you think about it a little bit. If you're the DNA guy, I could see how you see yourself as God when you figure that out. So, that is like you're a master of the makeup of the human person. So why can't you decide who actually gets to stay and who gets to go? This is the attitude that's required, though. How in the world do you end up with 78 million abortions every year? It's not just because it's, popular. It's not because of what Kamala Harris says. It's not because of Planned Parenthood's talking points. It's because the people behind all of this are like, we can determine somebody's value or dignity based on what we think or some test we create. And that's why it's very, very dangerous. And we haven't gotten to the worst one. He is next. Dirty Petey.
This guy sucks. Can I say that?
Yes.
This guy, he's just a terrible person.
Dirty Pete. He's a very bad person. Okay, Peter Singer. I don't know why we're getting all the Trump today. It's just, I don't know, the mood has got me.
Different than any other.
Shut up, Heather. Dirty Pete. Okay, so Peter Singer is professor of bioethics at Princeton University. He's argued that if a child is born with disabilities, such as hemophilia, to allow the parents to kill him so that they could replace him with a normal, healthy child, that may be the morally correct thing to do. So you don't like your kid, This is actually popularized now. Actually.
Replace that with anything.
Totally.
Anencephaly, Down syndrome, anything.
Right.
Because his philosophy is essentially a utilitarianism.
Yeah.
If it increases pleasure, max it out.
Oh.
If it increases suffering, eliminate it. It's actually he's somewhat consistent in this, but it's straight evil.
But he's the most successful out of the group, in my opinion, because a lot of people, they don't know who James Watson is or Francis Crick, but they know Peter Singer, even if it's not like, oh, he's the devil, but it's just they've heard the name. He's a famous scientist. But his stuff lasted. We do this. 92% of the babies that are found out with Downs, we kill them. So this worked. Iceland did it on a huge scale and bragged about eradicating Down syndrome. But he's the one, I think these first two are like it goes on, but it's rare. Like, hey, you're just going to let the kid die? Like, maybe don't come to my Super Bowl party. But Peter Singer was popularized via Planned Parenthood and medicine and just... look, your baby's not normal, and it doesn't have to be this way. You'll probably have a normal baby next time. And everybody's like, yeah, that's true. It's compassionate.
This is why I think people hate the church and hate Jesus. I think that the world could perhaps tolerate the church if maybe they'd roll their eyes, but they'd tolerate our rules and the liturgy, and they'd tolerate sexual ethics. But when we say that there is something worse than suffering, the world just will not accept that. The cross of Jesus Christ encapsulates everything that our world rejects because it involves suffering. It suggests that suffering can have meaning. It can be redemptive. And we're in a very Peter Singer world. No, there's no place for suffering. We won't do it. We would rather die than suffer, and we would rather kill than suffer.
And, in popular Christianity wants Christ without a cross,
Yes.
which we just see play out in so many ways. But Peter Singer, a book that we have referenced a lot, and he has a prominent chapter, and it's deserved, is Architects of the Culture of Death, which is a great book. Not the most uplifting title in the world, but a very good book, a very good reference. That's Benjamin Weicker, isn't that right? And DeMarco?
Yes.
Yes.
Donald DeMarco?
Not DeMarco Murray. He was a running back for the Cowboys. But yeah, every time I think of that book, I think of DeMarco Murray. So
we are degenerates.
DeMarco. But yeah, this is like Peter Singer. This sentence that we have in here, this is like the feel-good T-shirt. When you read the book Architects of the Culture of Death, you're like, Peter Singer, this is like one of the nicest things he ever said. I mean, he is a freaking psychopath.
If I remember correctly, he was interviewed in one of the, it was a documentary called The Demographic Bomb.
Yeah.
Based on the population bomb in response to that book. And he was interviewed, and he talked about how it's totally fine even if you have a toddler. So not just an infant, just freshly born after a failed abortion, but if you have a toddler, it's totally fine. You should be able to kill them.
Yeah.
And
No, he's totally for that. I don't know who you couldn't kill. Like if you were just hanging out with him in his living room and you were going through these scenarios and you're like, my grandma drives me crazy. He's like, yeah, old people, they need to go. How old is she?
Yeah.
Oh, she's like 60. She's in great health. She volunteers at the soup kitchen. I mean, I think you could get to a point and he'd be like, you can strangle her in the middle of the night. It's fine.
This is sort of the underlying philosophy, actually, of the Obamacare healthcare legislation. Because if you look into it, when they're passing it, the people who wrote it, everybody knows, a lot of people know the name Rahm Emanuel. His brother Ezekiel Emanuel was like Obama's healthcare. Like, remember when everybody in the government had like a czar title?
Yeah.
Like, what is this? We're in 19th century Russia. But he was like the healthcare guy. And if you got into his writings, it was very based on like, well, a 2-year-old, not that valuable. The state has not invested that many resources in this child. An elderly person, yes, the state has invested all of these resources in the elderly person, but there's no more production coming of it. So you sort of had this curve where like the most valuable life in America was like the 22-year-old who has gone through their education, they've gone through their college, and now the state gets to cash in and get the money back as they pay taxes on their production. And I think it straight comes from the same sort of mentality where it's strictly a utilitarian basis for there's no dignity. It's just value based on dollars and cents.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why this podcast is so important, because we're obviously pointing out the numbers that this has gone on, and even in Florida back to 2013, Minnesota, New York, California, 9 states, right? 9 states allow abortion through birth, and have, which I think ABC did release a correction. I may be wrong on that, but in the debate, the reporter was like, "That does not happen,"
And how many people saw that correction?
Oh,
I wonder.
Nobody. But that's that's kind of the numbers part of it, which we covered earlier. This is the philosophy of it, the mentality that drives it. And it's the mentality that has to drive it. This isn't like the world's a rough place. Not everybody has a lot of good circumstances. This is like they're in the suits and they're wearing their lab coats and they're saying, what we can do, just go in that room, and if there's any wiggling, we'll take care of it for you.
Yeah.
And saying it with a straight face, with just absolutely a dead conscience. I mean, this is why I don't harp on them, because I agree with it, but like the atheist for life, right, which is a great intellectual position and it's easy to do, and, being pro-life is like common sense. But I don't know what the atheist says to this. What does the atheist say to Peter Singer? Like, WTF?
Yeah.
I mean, what do you say to Peter Singer?
It's because I think the atheists for life are still they don't know it, but they're still drawing on a Christian value system. The atheists for life talking points don't make any sense 10 years before the incarnation.
They don't credit the viewpoint, but it's definitely founded. Somehow it's founded.
There are Christian assumptions baked into the atheists for life.
But
Yeah.
Peter Singer is appearing to the moral good.
Yeah.
He's saying that it's morally good that the baby with Downs die and you get, quote, a normal baby,
And
which
he declares that as a sane person of power who is of a certain intellectual value.
Do you remember the Christopher Walken skit in Saturday Night Live in the early 90s where he would like have these visions and he'd be like, done. And he'd have like, he could like see the future.
No.
And he would like tell his coworkers, it's like Rob Schneider, and he'd be like, done. He's like, you're going to meet a man. He's going to want a cup of coffee. And like, it's just, he's like in the office. Okay. And he's like in the break room and he has like these revelations and he's telling people and he does it to Phil Hartman. And Phil Hartman like puts his arm around her and says, I wanted to have a little talk. Listen, you're giving us all the creeps. That's completely what I think. Like when they go through this and they're in their little, and by the way, this happened in the 60s and 70s. They'd have their little meetings. They would say things like this, which are totally consistent with the evil nature of abortion. And the unfortunately smart Planned Parenthood people and people that were going to market abortion were like, let's maybe not have Peter at the press conference, and they knew that it was going to be reproductive rights and choice and freedom and women's empowerment and all this stuff. And we got those fluffy phrases from these lunatics who came up with this because they're the real driving force of what's behind it. But you can't sell this. This is Wackoville. So they, come up with all these euphemisms that we enjoy today.
But he's a psycho too because he's not a screamer. He's not out there with signs and bullhorns and things like that. I remember reading an article one time by a woman who had a disability. She was an adult with a disability, and so she's the exact type of person that Peter Singer would think should be killed for the betterment of the world and the reduction of human suffering. And she's just talking to me like, yeah, that's my opinion. They're happy to go out to dinner with you, but I'm not going to back off of my position that I think you should have been killed.
Yeah, but that's just stone cold.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the consistency that I think is scary. Okay, so that's that group. The next group of how we know this goes on are the abortionists themselves.
And there's quite a few of them.
Let's go through the list. We will name names.
All right. So there was a story out of El Paso a few decades back, pretty daunting. Dr. Raymond Showery in 1983 was found guilty of the murder for the 1979 drowning death of a born-alive infant of 5 to 7 months gestation that he had attempted to abort via hysterotomy abortion, which is a C-section performed with the intention of killing the fetus. So he was actually, this was in El Paso, and he was actually found guilty of this.
That's a crazy thing. A C-section is an invasive.
No, this is our list. We'll go through this. We won't have to dwell too much on that. Okay, so he was accused by his own staff of falsifying records to say that women were 20 weeks pregnant when they were actually further along. One former employee, Gloria, said such late-term abortions were routine and that, quote, he wanted them in pieces, but a lot of times they would come out whole. She told the El Paso Times that she saw at least 2 infants born alive after the procedure, and they were left to die.
This was in Texas 4 decades ago.
Yes. So it's not recent. It's not an invention. It's not propaganda. It's happened and is happening. Okay, there's others that are very, very much well-known. The late Leroy Carhart, who I've wrote about in, I think, all the books except What to Say When To. Leroy was a very famous late-term abortion doctor, regularly talked about this. Curtis Boyd, another late-term abortion doctor.
Currently in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
And like a minister or something too, right?
That's Warren Hearn. He's next on our list. Warren Hearn, we will withhold the Reverend title. He is a very famous late-term abortion doctor, Boulder, Colorado. We've talked about him on the podcast. Julie Wilkinson is a former nurse from his facility, former late-term abortion nurse from his facility. We'll put in the show notes. I don't know it off the top of my head, but she has been a podcast guest. She was absolutely fantastic. She is a wonderful 40 Days for Life participant. Her story will rock your world. I encourage people to go back. In the show notes, we'll put that episode. But I'm trying to come up with a reasonable analogy. But if you're a late-term abortion nurse for Warren Hearn, that's like being on SEAL Team 6 that got Osama bin Laden. It's like the opposite, It's like the worst you could do is that, and she sort of takes us into that world. We've had 40 Days for Life outside his place for a long time.
Yes.
I went to the first one in 2008 when it started snowing when we were out there.
Those people deserve a shout out who have been doing that, because that's tough. You're less likely to see a saved baby at that location because it's the multiple day procedures, and they're oftentimes traveling from across the country, so they're committed. They suffer out there. There's a palpable darkness out there.
And he lives there, right? If I remember correctly, he lives at his late-term abortion facility, or he'll stay there frequently, but I think he lives there.
He has property kind of out, further out. I know this actually because I recently...
You're not stalking him. We just
No.
For the record.
He publicized this in the documentary After Tiller. And I don't know if you guys, I remember very, very clearly when this came out, and I was adamant that I did not want to watch this documentary. But recently I felt, for the sake of being able to just share, what's been out there for a while, I watched it. And, of course they were making infamous Dr. Tiller, Dr. Hearn, Dr. Carhart, Dr. Susan Robinson, and Dr. Shelley Sella. At the time, they were like the 5 most well-known late-term abortionists in the country. And it wasn't nearly as, I don't want to say it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. It was much more heartfelt. It was very much like they really do care about these women, like look at these horrible situations, and they don't want this, to happen, but gosh, look how great it is that they're here when it has to happen, and they're family people, and they have, Dr. Hearn and his wife have this retirement home, and they do these outdoor things, and it was very sad. It was very sad that you could be so deceived, and they know good and well. Of course, they never showed, the actual abortion
But he is an ordained minister, and he will I read this article, so I don't want to totally mess this up. But I believe he offers to baptize your baby or allow you to see the baby. The
Yes.
aborted late-term abortion.
Yes. And that there was a one.
This is Warren Hearn in Boulder.
He's also like a PhD in sociology and has published books about how humanity is like a plague or a cancer on the earth. He's like got a little Hannibal Lecter in him.
That's why I know on all those stuff, Tiller was like that. Carhart was like that. These are angry lunatics. And you always get, because that even, I remember Abby saying, George was so sweet. Like George
She said
Tiller.
he was a family man.
She's like, a family man.
was a
He's so
friend.
sweet. And then like 2 sentences later, she'd be like, I just don't know how he did late-term abortions. I mean, he was so calm. And I remember Abby said something like, I kept wanting to be like, why is anything wrong with you? Like, how do you do that? Like, I work for Planned Parenthood, and I don't even want that to go on. And I just think that when you read the other interviews, not a professional documentary, it's a little different of a tone. I mean, Carhart said it's like meat in the crock pot.
Yep.
And,
Yeah.
you know, he's definitely, he's called us the enemy.
This quiet family man demeanor, though, I think all that does to show is that people who do evil are not some particular special breed or other species. Any human being is capable of great evil if you make the decision to do something that is evil.
I think this is something movies do a good job at.
Yeah.
The villain is like charming,
Yeah.
like Hans Gruber.
Yeah.
I mean, you're just like, you know, they hardly ever, unless you're, I haven't seen any of the new, like the Joker stuff, but I mean, you know, the Joker was always like the crazy kind of off his rocker. That's most villains in a lot of movies are portrayed like, hey, he's the nicest guy in the world, which is always what you hear when some tragedy's gone down. Like, we just never knew. They seem like a normal family.
Yeah.
You know?
This is why we're so comfortable like casting Hitler to hell, like because there's nothing normal looking about that guy. It's like
He's yelling.
he's shouting. He looks like the mustache is out of control. Like he's just like bad guy right out of central casting. And I think that kind of deludes people into thinking that like your personal demeanor has something to do with what type of person you are. It doesn't necessarily.
Do you want to go through the rest of our abortionist list and then we will wrap up?
Yeah. So there was another one that was made into a viral video. I believe Live Action put out this video going undercover for a Washington, D.C. abortionist. I believe he's still there, Dr. Cesare Santangelo. And this was in 2012. The video was from November 29th of 2012. The journalist who was actually pregnant, 24 weeks, going undercover, was asking him questions about the procedure in his office, and she said, "What happens if it survives?" And she kept probing and probing, and she's like, "Because I don't want to be responsible. Like, I don't want to have to take a baby home. That's the whole point of me being here. So I just want to make sure." And so she kept on kind of asking him, and he was like, "We wouldn't help the baby." I mean, he said that on video. We wouldn't help it if it survived. That's in Washington, D.C. in 2012. Late-term abortions never happen.
November 29th,
Infanticide.
2012, to be specific.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, we would not help the baby.
Another, a Missouri abortionist. I don't know if this one is still an abortionist, but
She's very active still.
Is she?
Like
Okay,
You
Colleen-
see her in a lot of national news coverage.
McNicholas.
McNicholas. See, that's interesting. Somehow that name I didn't recall that name, but she was quoted as saying, "My practice includes abortion care." Stupid to add that word, "through the point of viability, and that could be at any point." And that was in one of those same testimonials, not the same one as the Planned Parenthood lobbyist before, but later on. Maybe that's why, to me, it seems more recent. It's because those are so similar.
Yeah, they are. And this is why I hate the viability thing, that sometimes pro-lifers get roped into that. I mean, I'm against it over viability. And like you and I have college buddies that aren't
moving
viable
target.
now, can't take care of themselves.
Right.
But because it's the moving target.
Yeah.
I've read abortion care through the point of viability, and that could be any point.
Yeah.
And that's what she said. That could be
Second
any
grade.
point.
Save up to 32% or more. Well, is it up to or is it more?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the demand that we put on the unborn child, you got to live without your mom outside her womb or you don't make it. That's what you're responsible for. And we thought it was 22 weeks. Now it's 23. Now it's 21. We're just moving it. and the baby's sitting here going, can somebody just take care of me? Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, you have to survive outside the womb apart from your mom, which, by the way, they can't do once they're born. Somebody's got to come and feed the child and change the child. And, you know, it's just we really let them get away with that, with the viability thing. I'm against it at viability. And everybody's like, yeah, I guess that makes sense. And you're like, what? What if your kid fails out of college? You shoot him? I mean, so you just have to hit this certain standard or you don't get to live? It's just, it's such an intolerant, merciless approach to children at any age.
Yep. And then there were none, which is, of course, Abby Johnson's ministry. She is, they have several dozen workers, former abortion workers, that have shared that they witnessed a baby born alive after an abortion in the 2nd and 3rd trimesters, and that life-saving care was usually denied to the child. Now, there's not a specific number because they said this number keeps changing, but it's dozens at this point of their former workers that have reported this. And it's that's something that they're admitting to. I committed this crime, or I witnessed this, and I did nothing, and that's a big admission.
Yeah, well, we've encountered a lot of. It's a cross, but we've encountered a lot of people who were nurses or in the medical facility, and they knew it was going on, and they didn't do anything.
Yep.
Kermit Gosnell. I remember when this happened. I started including it in speeches, and people were like, "You made that up."
Yeah.
And it was just from the FBI report.
Mm-hmm.
Here's some irony. Sorry, FBI raiding late-term abortionists who were cutting the heads off of babies. Now they're raiding Mark Houck. Okay, Kermit Gosnell, convicted of first-degree murder of 3 babies that survived botched abortions. He was acquitted of a 4th baby because there was lack of witnesses. But, quote, 47 aborted fetuses were stored in refrigerators at the clinic. The defense claimed not a single baby was born alive in the facility. So the best pro-life argument you will ever hear, get the movie Gosnell. Great movie. Really good movie. The closing argument of Gosnell's attorney is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
For modern day America, because he's brutally honest. He has to be. They have all this evidence and they have pictures and they have all this stuff. And he basically says abortion's murder. It's bloody. It's messy. You can think whatever you want of it. But this man was willing to do it. And it was legal in the United States of America. And if that makes you angry or disgusts you, I'm sorry. But it's legal. And it's not pretty. And it was a great argument. Didn't work, obviously, because he's, like, is basically what's he supposed to do in that situation, and that the movie's very, very good, but you can go back and the most powerful thing I saw, this is 2010, February of 2010, he's rated. The FBI agent is interviewed on Fox News, and he had been in like Iraq and Afghanistan, and was in the FBI now and all this stuff. And he's just, the FBI is the one that named it a house of horrors, his facility. But he's basically in shock explaining what he saw. And the movie does a good job of that. The movie's heavy, obviously, but it's definitely worth watching. It's definitely worth juniors and seniors in high school seeing. And it's 100% accurate. 100% accurate. Is this his nurse?
She was one of the
Adrian?
clinicians. Yep. So she, you can read Adrian's story. She actually is a quitter that's gone through, and then there were none now. But she says in part of her testimony that Dr. Gosnell had performed 16,000 abortions, including many late term. So there you go. More confirmation, late term, meaning 2nd and 3rd trimester abortions. She was convicted, Adrian was convicted of 3rd-degree murder and was facing 140 years in prison, but was given a sentence of time served, 28 months plus 3 years of probation. And she said it was enough time for some of the fog to clear away for me to see the evil of my own actions. And this woman, she's featured in the new film Unthinkable that Abby's coming out with. She, people will look at her and say, how could you sit there and watch him do that? all those years because
Yeah.
she was with him. But she actually has a whole history where she grew up and the Gosnells were very close to her and they kind of took her under their wing. And she called him uncle. And they even housed her for a while. She had crisis pregnancy and they helped her with her daughter. So like many of the abortion workers, little by little, they let that sin, get worse and worse and worse. And he could do no wrong in her eyes, she had just been completely blinded.
The Gosnell movie, the actor who plays him is unbelievable. Not just because he looks just like him, but
Does look like him.
You believe that it's him. I mean, and even the FBI agents were like, that guy was amazing. Like, that was just like he goes and plays the piano during the raid, and they're like, who does this? Like, this guy's crazy. I think that would be if you get the questions of like, well, what would you ask Kamala Harris? What would you ask Donald Trump? I would ask Kamala Harris if she, in a post-Roe America, if she would pardon Kermit Gosnell.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I think you'd like that one.
Yeah. Big
Because
time.
the pardon questions come up a lot, but that's a real one. In a post-Roe America, this is absolutely legal in New York. He just doesn't have to cut their heads off, right? And that's, it's like what Dr. Haywood Robinson says about Scott Peterson. Like, don't we need to apologize to him and charge him with practicing medicine without a license?
Oh, yeah.
For the second murder of his unborn child. But Gosnell, everything he was doing was legal, except he wasn't, I guess, his care was the scissors, but he could do this in New York.
Yeah.
Should we be locking up abortionists, Kamala? Shouldn't you consider pardoning him? So anyways, I guess I don't want to end on that note, but this is part one. This is part one of the.
There will be another one next week.
There'll be another one next week, the fourth trimester. But we're going to get into the why, and we're going to get into a couple of other things for this two-part series. But this is coming up, and I think in 2024, these are the talking points of the fact that this goes on, the fact that it's been going on for a long time, and that it's well documented. And it's not well documented, by the pro-life movement. It's well documented by the government and, ironically, the media. And so we will cover part 2 next week. If you are finding that this and other topics are coming up in your daily life during this election cycle, be sure to order What to Say When 2. As a reminder, you can not have read What to Say When, the first one, and still get a lot out and totally be able to understand What to Say When part 2. Of course, the first one's good, so get that one also. But do get What to Say When 2. It is specifically designed towards discussing abortion in a post-Roe America. So thank you, Steve. Thank you, Heather. We will be back next week with part 2 of our 4th trimester abortion podcast. We will see you then. God bless you.